My people have committed two sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own cisterns, broken cisterns that cannot hold water.
Snake oil. Losing my religion. Next on So What?
Hi, I'm Chris Dorman.
And I'm Don Waite.
Welcome back to So What? It's been a couple of weeks since we've talked to you.
Missed you guys.
Yeah. And in those 2 weeks, I got to tell you, God has been faithful to deal with me as I continue to look at sin in my life and to be drawn nearer to Christ. Right after we posted our last podcast, I was reading in the Gospel of Luke, and in chapter 10, when the 72 are sent out and they come back to Jesus and report to him how excited they are that the demons even submitted to them, right? And Jesus said, well, that's great, but don't rejoice about those things. Rejoice that your names are written in heaven. Wow. And that stayed with me. It just stayed with me. It's like, okay, it's all about him, right? It's not about the good things that he does for us or even the good things we get to do for him, but it's about him and a relationship with him. And this sort of stayed with me. And then I started struggling with just not feeling great and feeling this angst in my soul. That sort of culminated earlier this week on Monday and Tuesday when I was overwhelmed with a sense of dread and foreboding that I could not shake.
Dude, that's dark.
It was dark. It was dark. And I have told you I suffer from depression, but that's not what this was. I knew it was spiritual. I knew it. I felt it. It was different than anything I'd really experienced before. And so I reached out for food, sugar, stuff to try and pick up my spirits to feel better. And then it hit me. It was a pain that God wanted me to feel. I was begging God for greater intimacy. And he was doing that by showing me no matter how close I get to him, until I'm with him in heaven, there's always going to be a chasm between me and him. I'm in a relationship with him. It's vital. It's vibrant. It's exciting. It's life-giving.
Yeah.
But it's incomplete. And it can't be complete this side of heaven. And God was showing me no matter what you do to try and mask that pain,
right,
that ache will never go away. And to mask that pain is sin. I was relying on carnal things to feel better when God wanted me to feel that pain.
And it's the more you grow and the more you mature, I think the deeper that chasm feels and the more painful it can become. And that seems somewhat counterintuitive in many ways. And yet that's a reality that I think we're awakening to and realizing, hey, wait a minute, we can't satisfy at this side of glory. And that's an intent of God. And that makes us long for more of him.
Right. For
me to live as Christ, but to die is to gain, to have more of Jesus Christ.
That's right. You might think that, like I did when you're first a Christian, that the longer you walk with him, the less sin you'll have in your life. And the truth is, the longer you're a Christian, the more acutely you are aware of your sin. The more pronounced your sin is, the more despair it causes in your heart, and the greater longing you have to be rid of it.
Right.
And you don't realize that when you're a baby Christian. Right. It's only as you mature in your faith that you realize that you're always going to be dealing with that. Always. And so I remember a few weeks ago I did a podcast called Kryptonite, and I shared with you how God had dealt with me in a very powerful and positive way, dealing with the sin that had really troubled me for decades, and how my battle against the flesh was in and of itself flesh. I didn't like this sin because of how it made me feel, not because it was an offense against God. And then through that process, God really delivered me from that. Doesn't mean I'm never going to deal with it again, because I do. But it's totally different now. I feel completely different. But in the back of my mind, I had this sense that if only God would deal with this, then I could have unhindered relationship with him and have real joy, a greater sense of a permanent sense of joy. And what I learned is that's just not true. Well, it isn't true.
And yet we do that in our lives, right, Chris? And we do this. Like, if I only had this, how many out there have said, if I only had this job, or if I had a marriage, or if my kids were healthy and do well in school.
These are good things.
They're all good things. But we think that if we have those things, that this longing that we have will be satisfied. But it ultimately
a pain that we have.
Right. And it's just a snake oil.
It is.
right? It's not real.
It's not true. It isn't true. It's fake. And so what we do, beloved, to deal with that ache in our soul, that longing in our soul, is we try to cover it up. We try to deal with it by making ourselves feel better.
Right.
And that's usually sin. We look to something in our flesh to make us feel better. And how many of you are driven to certain behaviors and you have no idea why? But you have this sense that you've got to try and feel better. There's just something about it. You just can't stop yourself. Could it be the Holy Spirit is trying to show you and trying to draw you nearer to Himself by giving you an ache in your soul that only He can fulfill? And that all you're doing is masking this pain. You can't resolve that pain. You'll never, ever make it go away. And what makes it worse is the more you sin, the worse it gets, doesn't it? The more you sin, the more you gave in to this desire for relief now, the worse you feel, the greater distance you feel. Beloved, I want to encourage you that when you feel that sense of longing and you're looking for that sense of relief, turn to Him. Because it could be in that moment, that's what He's trying to do, to draw you ever nearer to Himself, and not to some temporal thing that'll give you satisfaction for about an eighth of a second before the guilt and the shame kicks in. It could be He's trying to draw you nearer to Himself, away from this world, away from your flesh, and to Him.
Right. You know, Chris, the more I have of Christ, the more I want Christ, and the more the chasm becomes more pronounced, and I want more and more and more of Him.
Yes.
You know, and my mind goes to a child. And if you've never seen this, it's customary for a child on their first birthday to get a real big chunk of birthday cake, or maybe even a whole little cake.
Little cakes. They're
just
so
right
cute.
in front of them, right? It's so great.
Yeah.
And they put this thing on the table in front of them or on the high chair, and they're staring at it. They don't even know what to do with it.
Right.
Sometimes they're even afraid of it.
They're cute. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's true. If
You know,
you've never seen this, it's hilarious.
They put their hand in it, and then they do what any little child would do. They put it in their mouth. And then their whole world just got rocked and is changed. They're like, oh my God. And they're like,
And they wear it.
and they wear it. I'm like getting choked up.
It's true.
And they want more and more and more of the cake. And they can't get enough of it. And it's gone, and they start crying because they want more. I want more cake. And that's what it is. We want more of Christ.
Yes, exactly. Amen.
man.
Amen to that.
That's heavy stuff, Chris. It really is.
It's awesome stuff, though.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I'll write about it more on my Facebook post, friends.
There you go.
But I got to tell you, the things that I've seen in the last 2 weeks have been remarkable. Remarkable. And it's God just being faithful to do what He said He would do, to form Christ in me. And that's what He wants to do with you, too. But it's going to be hard to do as you keep giving in to that need to satisfy your flesh when it can't be. It will never be. That ache is there for a reason. That ache is there to draw you nearer to Him. So let Him do that in you. Thank you for tuning in, my friends, and I'll talk to you next week.
We'll see you soon.